Um, wow, that I read way too long, way too far. It's only supposed to be 15 minutes. Remember, Mom? Yeah, it was 16, almost 17. I'm like, I got too engrossed in the story and I forgot to check the time. So let me do a little better this time. Sorry, Mom. Okay, yeah, if I can't get it over, then I'll just have to do it again. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay, so he was supposed to be like a brother. Tell me the story. When to be, where to begin? At the beginning. All right. We were children together on opposite sides of the street of the chain, and from our window above the Cohen's grocery. I know it well. We could see the dome of the mosque from his window, and from his window, no doubt, he could see the Wailing Wall. On Shabbat, he would come and light candles for us. At the end of the Muslim feast, we would bring food to his family, and he would bring bread and honey at the end of ours. His father and mother were devoted Muslims, tolerant, kind people. Ibrahim was not so much my friend as he was a friend and a brother to Eli. This Eli was your older brother who was killed? Moshe nodded. Yes. Hassan killed him, did he not? Moshe nodded again more slowly. Betrayed him. But why did he do such a thing, Moshe? The old man's eyes were burning with intensity now. He had a sister, a year younger than Ellie. Ellie loved her secretly. She loved him as well. Oh, Eli, sorry, I'm reading. It's not Ellie, Mom. He had a sister, a year younger than Eli. Eli loved her secretly, and she loved him as well. So that would be Eli, Moshe's brother. Hassan knew of this, but felt it was a good thing that he and Eli would be truly brothers. But Moshe dug at a crack in the concrete floor with the toe of his shoe. But what? The old man urged him on. We are Jews, he shrugged, remembering that the night that Eli had told his father of his love for the beautiful young Arab girl. Do you know what your marriage would to her would mean for you? For all of us. Eli's father showed no visible anger, but his message was clear. Eli nodded his head silently and went to his room, where Moshe sat reading in an overstuffed chair. He pretended not to notice when Eli stretched out on the bed and tears flowed silently down his cheeks. Finally, Eli asked his brother, What will you do? Eli wiped his eyes and sat up, wrapping his arms around his knees. Can I tear out the beard of my father? I must not see her again. But why? Moshe asked. Can she not become a Jew? She will not. To marry her means that I turn my back on my faith and my family. You, he looked painfully into Moshe's eyes, could no longer call me brother. I would be dead to you. Dead. But you love her. Yes, Eli cried, and we shall not speak of it again. It was a memory time that had not healed. For a long moment, Moshe sat in the metal chair thinking of 1,000 things, thinking about Ellie, what he would have done if he had been Eli. His father was dead now, and Moshe did not live according to the old ways any longer. He loved Ellie, loved her as he had never allowed himself to love another woman before. The old man coughed loudly, pulling Moshe back to the present. Where are you? he asked. In the past, which sometimes appears to repeat itself, Moshe replied, and he looked up at the old man. My brother made a decision I would not have the strength to make. He broke off the relationship with the girl. He would not speak to Hassan when he approached him in the street. He turned his back and walked away when he saw his friend. He turned away in silence from those that he had loved. And then the sister of Hassan was betrothed and married to a member of the Mutif's guard, a fellow named Ram Kadar. She took her own life shortly thereafter. We heard that she had left a note for Eli, but he never got it. A few weeks later, Eli was torn apart by a mob of Arabs in the marketplace who claimed he had defiled an Arab woman. Hassan was at the head of the mob, and in the end, you know how many died. Not just Eli, but when it was all finished, this eye for an eye business that had killed many innocents on both sides. Did you ever hear fear of his hatred? Only when it reaches out for those that I love. Not for myself, I only pitied him. Your Ellie Warren is not a Jew, the old man probed. I am not my brother. Okay, wow. So David leaned his head back against the seat and watched as Michael closed his eyes and nodded and bobbed with the gentle rocking of the train to Prague. He smiled as Michael jerked his head up and then slowly relaxed his chin once again, resting on his chest. As the train rumbled over a bridge trestle, he jerked his head back again and then crossed his arms and fell against the window with his mouth half open. With 3 days' growth of beard and his hair falling in wisps across his bald head, he looked for all the world like a Skid Row bum sleeping it off. Okay, so David wished he knew how to use the big camera he had purchased in Paris, a second-hand store for the morning before. For a moment, he was tempted to pull it out of his suitcase and try to figure it out. But he grinned and determined to just remember the sight of Michael with his mouth hanging open against the faded plush velvet of their train compartment. The generals of the Third Reich prowled Europe in this very train compartment, he thought, glancing around. The fabric was worn thin from the chafing of the Nazi uniforms. Like the land, the maintenance of luxury and necessity alike had been put on hold as men had gone about their business of blowing one another up in Europe. And now that the war had ended, all that remained was the business of rebuilding. Rusting steel skeletons of Nazi transport lay along the railroad tracks. David stared out the window at the scarred countryside and then closed his eyes from the memory of the German soldiers running for cover along these very tracks as he too dived at their troop train. Now the remnants of Nazi air power waited on the deserted airfield in Czechoslovakia to be sold to the highest bidder. He and Michael were traveling to Prague to meet with Aravel and examine a flock of Me-109 fighter jets left behind by the defeated enemy in their headlong retreat from a victorious Soviet army. The train stopped and started, slowing, lurching across the broken countryside. The gray stones of the villages looked the same, weary and cold and hungry. The fields, once rich with harvest, seemed blighted. The stubble of the first crop since the war poked through half-frozen mud, and the steady clank of the wheels slowed to a stop for what seemed like the 1,000th time. David fixed his gaze on a peasant man dressed in a patched brown coat and carrying a basket slung across his back. His right coat sleeve was empty and pinned up. In which war, and for what cause, David wondered, did the old man give his arm? In the end, had it mattered? David looked down at his own hands and how he wished that his life would matter, that he could make a difference in a world whose reality seemed so barren and hopeless. He thought of his father then, whose faith seemed to reach far beyond his existence to touch the lives of those around him. And what of Ellie? His own selfishness had left wounds in her heart and soul as deep as those on the land he now passed through. He stared down at the weeds growing higher between the tides of sabotage rail lines. The men who bombed them would now have the task of rebuilding. It seemed to David that his life had been one endless blitzkrieg, and now he too was faced with the seemingly impossible task of rebuilding what he had destroyed. He only hoped that it was not too late for him and Ellie. The train shuddered and clacked into motion again. passing slowly through a village where olive-clad U.S. Army engineers directed civilians as they bulldozed through the rubble of a bombed building. The train then passed the muddy field, frightening a flock of blackbirds who rose and banked against the gray sky in the distance. David saw a tall brick smokestack of Dachau crematoriums. Their thick gray haze now had dissipated and absorbed into the land surrounding them. The very air of Europe has become like a cemetery, David thought, and every human breath is tainted by the guilt of smokestacks. I want to make a difference, he whispered. He leaned back against the seat and smiled at Michael, who still slept with the rocking gentleness of the train. David reached over and tapped him on top of his head. Hey, Scarecrow, wake up. Michael opened one eye and scowled. Yeah? What do you want? He sat up and rubbed his face with both hands. I just wanted to say I'm glad you're here, you know? Michael screwed up his face and rolled his eyes. Then he sighed and settled back against the seat once more. Moments later, his head bobbed again, and his chin rested on his chest as the train clacked toward Prague. Smoke curled lazily upward, creating the misbegotten halos above the heads of the men of the Sons of Mohammed's coffee shop in Latrerne. Hassan smiled disarmingly across the table at the two British Army's deserters who leered up at the dancing girl on a stage before them. Their bloodshot eyes danced with the sound of the pulsating music. Hassan hid his contempt for the traitors of their own kind and poured more coffee into their cup, which they fortified with whiskey. A drop, mate? A soldier held out a silver hip flask towards Hassan's cup. He covered the cup with his hand. Followers of the Prophet do not drink alcohol. Temperance League got to you too, huh? The soldier answered drunkenly. Hassan merely shrugged and sipped his coffee, waiting until the dance ended with a flourish, and then the two soldiers hooted and wildly applauded. They slurped their coffee, wiped their mouth with the back of their hands. You like our entertainment, eh? Asked Hassan. I ain't seen anything this good since Paris in '45. You think you can introduce me to her? This girl or a dozen others, my friend. A few days from now you shall be heroes among my people, as Lawrence who led the Bedouins to victory against the Turks. All I say is, where's the money? The more surly of the two men held out his hand, palm up. Ah, a minor detail, Hassan assured. Shall we say 30 pounds now and 30 when the deed is done? He reached for his money pouch and counted out 30 notes on the table before them. So where do you want this stuff delivered? Asked the other soldier. I told you. You simply keep your mouth shut, drive the truck. I shall tell you when you have reached your destination. Christmas morning, eh? An end to those Christ killers, I say, and good riddance. The two deserters raised their cup in a toast to death and drained their drinks in one swallow. Okay, Shabbat is the next chapter. And I think, isn't that their Sunday? They celebrate Shabbat from sundown to sundown. I think that, Mom, I could be wrong. And if you were here, we could have a little chat about it because I know you know exactly what it is. You're so smart. Mwah. Okay. All right, Mom. So I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I will talk to you later. And